Welcome to a special bonus episode of the Nero Show featuring NorCal Cycling and Cam Nicholls. It's a privilege to have these guys back on the channel. We're going to chat about the perfect crit bike, making sense of road bike tyre widths, the perfect indoor setup, and Cam wants to get back racing. So we go through some of the pros and cons. All right, let's get into it. All right, gents, welcome. Yeah, I kind of want to start maybe with some of the comparison stuff because you guys have been doing this content on YouTube for the best part of 4 or 5 years, actually having a look through back some of your stuff. Like I think, Jeff, 4 years ago, you were comparing SL6s and against pro comp bikes. So it's the type of content you've been doing for a while and you've seen plenty of results now. And just recently, NorCal Cycling dropped another comparison video, this time sort of a wheel-based one. And again, it looked like the cheaper option was just about competing on the performance level. Are we at that tipping point?
Well, what was that? So that video that you're talking about, that wheel comparison, just went up last night. I haven't had a time to watch it before we've hopped on this morning. What was that comparing, that latest one?
Yeah. It was a wheel comparison, and it was these two offerings from Super Team, which is a budget-oriented brand, against Shimano, which everyone knows what Shimano is. You don't even have to be a cyclist to know what Shimano is. So that's the core of the question you guys nailed, which is like, are we there yet? Are these budget options competing with the big guys? Because for a long time they weren't. And should I spoil it? Should we talk about the results of the video? So from a straight performance standpoint, like aerodynamics, weight, that sort of thing, yes, it's there. Also, some of the features now that you can find on these budget brands are there as well. For the longest time, that star ratchet was like a protected piece of technology in DT Swiss, right? And as far as I understand it, that patent has now ran out. So you can see all of these other budget-oriented brands that are now using that technology. All these other things that I think you start to get into like straight marketing. So there's like really fat bladed carbon spokes. There's like the kind of the golf ball dimples on the rim, that sort of stuff. I don't think that does anything. But in any case, these brands now are getting there from a performance standpoint. One thing that I wish I could do is ride each of these wheels for like a year or 3 years even and just find out, will it be as good as it is today as it is years from now? But obviously that's not really something that I can do. Let's release one video every 3 years. It's not really a good decision for YouTube. But yeah, from a performance standpoint, I think it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I can add another layer onto that one because I had the Super Team wheels last year, and this was actually a review which doesn't happen all that often. It's normally they give you the product and then that's it. But with this one, I kind of realized when you're doing wheel reviews and comparisons, particularly for me, I take it into an expert mechanic, Aaron Dobbs, and it's very time consuming. So now I just say, look, I need to be remunerated for my time if I'm to do it. And with wheel reviews, I think you can get away with, this is my view, I could be wrong here, I'm often wrong, but you can get away with just presenting data. Whereas I think with bikes, even if a bike is given to you, and perhaps we can go down that rabbit hole later on in the video, then people still want your opinion, like, what's the handling like, is it stiff? But with wheels, you can just do like a comparison of, some speed tests. And I did the Super Team wheels as well last year, and I didn't give any of my opinion about the wheels. I just compared them speed test-wise on a low wind day using an uphill, downhill segment and a flat segment. And the Super Team wheels, which have the Star Ratchet hub, which you mentioned there, Jeff, compared to DT Swiss wheels with a DT Swiss 180 ceramic bearing, the time differences across my runs were minimal, and the difference in price was, I think, close to 3,000 USD. It was the DT Swiss wheels that come on the BMC Team Machine SLR01, and I think they're about 4,000 versus 1,200 for the Super Team wheels. So, like, I look at carbon wheels these days across all the testing that I've done, and that is one thing where I'm like, I would, if I wasn't a YouTuber and being given products and wheels, there's no way I would spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a set of carbon wheels. I would go for an emerging Chinese brand, a Windspace Hyper, a Super Team, a 1,500, 1,200 to 1,500, and be done with it, because they're borderline just as good, maybe if not better in some cases.
So where does that leave the bigger name brands then? Do they just have to rely on local sales arguably better warranty and those types of things? Or do they need to do more, have more advancements to try and pull ahead again? Like, where do you guys see that in terms of what's the next 5 years of the name brand to try and stay ahead?
I'll go first. I think definitely rocking up to your local group ride on a set of Envies is cooler than rocking up on a set of super teams. So I think that plays, like, let's be honest here, like that plays a big role. A resale, you know, Chinese wheels are harder to resell than a Zip or an Envy. And customer support, like I deal with these Chinese companies a lot, and you know, I think their support is still like their products. Yeah, are still hit and miss. I think maybe we'll get to a point where it's more hit than miss, but it's a bit of a lottery with support. Whereas and look, it can be the same with Western brands, but I think Western brands are more hit than miss. So I think it's those three things. It's, you know, what do you want to ride? What brand do you want to have on your bike? It's customer service and support, and it's resale. What do you reckon, Jeff?
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to go there. Like, a lot of the mainstream Western brands have crash replacement. In this case, Shimano doesn't, so that's kind of a moot point. But a lot of them do, which is nice. I've taken up Bontrager on that. I had a pair of Bontrager wheels years ago that I just cracked in a race. They just cracked. And I went to a local retailer, and I got another wheel, like, within days. It was pretty incredible. So there's that. And then also, yeah, the customer service you talked about. But I will come back to one thing you said. You know, showing up with the Envies is cool, but winning with the super teams is really cool. Like, if you can win.
I was going to ask you that, Jeff. So what's the Alviso buzz? Like, if you're turning up on that cheaper set of wheels, what's the kind of, are people assessing you based, oh, this guy's like a Hubbard, like a new cyclist, or is it like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He's sought those wheels out. Like, what's the buzz on them?
Well, I think that everybody does that, right? I think when you show up to the start line of a race and you're looking at somebody with really expensive equipment, then you take them more seriously and you think this guy must be real serious. But really, once they blow the whistle, all of it's kind of out the door, because, like, how do they race? You know what I mean? And to me, it doesn't matter what equipment they're on. In fact, if they're beating me on lesser equipment, I'm not even sure, like, Super Team in this example is lesser equipment, like we've been talking about. I think that they're at the same level in terms of performance with the mainstream brands, but it's really how the individual races. But yeah, there is that, like, start line, like, what's this person riding? You know what I mean? I've mentioned it in the Alviso videos before, like the guy who shows up with, like, 808s, you know, like the super deep wheels. I'm like, okay, obviously, like, you're making a statement with that, you know? But yeah, I don't know if there's any, like, I don't think that, at least in my perception, I look at people who show up with these lesser known brands, and I think that they are less of a quality of a rider. That's not the perception I have.
But it hasn't gone the other way yet. So it hasn't, because what I've started to see a bit is, so the S5, the Scott Foil, whatever it might be, but paired with the super teams or the CRWs, and that's becoming, especially at the masters level, that's sort of becoming almost the standard operating procedure. And as far as the kind of the start line aspect, I actually now, like, just personally, I actually look at it as, oh, hang on, this guy's following along. Like, they've made a conscious decision here to set this bike up with a package that works for them, rather than I've just gone into the shop and bought whatever Wout van Aert's on type thing. So yeah, I felt like it's almost crossed that threshold. Yeah,
I got you. I know I don't look at people with, I guess, like, bespoke equipment. You know what I mean? Like, the wheels don't match the bike. Like, that to me, it doesn't really matter what brand it is. Yeah, there's intention behind what they're doing in that race for sure. I'm with you on that.
One thing that I've done recently, and I haven't produced a video yet, I'm getting a bit of heat because it's been a while, I just haven't had a day where I can do the test, but I took an entry-level, you know, BMC Team Machine. It's not an entry-level bike. I got trolled massively saying, that's not an entry-level bike, but it is an entry-level BMC Team Machine. And what is it, like 4,000 or 5,000 with 105 Di2. And the frame, even though it's their tier 2 carbon, is still the same geometry, still the same design. So it's a really nice frame, and you can do this across Specialized, Cannondale, whatever. But the wheels and the tires and the bars are crap. And I think what this emerging Chinese space has enabled is somebody who's in that entry level, that maybe can spend, once they've bought the bike, you know, maybe $1,000, $2,000 to upgrade it, and upgrade it really, really well. So I've upgraded this entry-level BMC with the Super Team wheels. I've got some fast sport bars I got from Panda Podium, and I'm riding the bike. I'm like, man, this is actually a really good bike, and it's so much cheaper than buying, you know, the top tier BMC. So I think it's really worked quite nicely into that market as well, versus somebody thinking they need to spend $2 or $3 grand, you know, to really upgrade their bike. Now it's maybe more like 1,000.
Yeah, the Polygon Helios that I recently reviewed, I think fits nicely in that space. It's a budget bike, but the parts where they are clearly saving costs to manufacture and to deliver it for like $4,000, which I also got heat for, like, that is not entry level, but bikes are expensive. But I think that the wheels were one of the things, and that was one of my big key takeaways from the video, is like, yeah, the wheels are not great, but you don't need great wheels for training. Like, buy yourself the nice race wheels, which have nice rubber on them, and you're not out there training with them. So they're kept really in really nice condition. Now you have like the set of training wheels, the set of race wheels, and the bike is great. And it's got Dura-Ace on it. Like, what's there not to like about that?
The age of the kind of training wheel, race wheel thing, though, I think that could be a generational thing that we might be on the wrong side of, gents. Like, the days of that being a thing, now it's just, what's the package? That's my package, done. And, you know, Jesse and I had a whinge about this the other day on the show about, like, disc brakes. Like, oh, you got to take the wheels in and out. Now the bloody thing's tinking away. So it's, I totally hear you, and I want to see that package move aside to more the kind of, oh no, you know what, I'm going to upgrade the lower end with the Chinese carbon race wheel. But yeah, the roadblocks to that are a little bit more than when we were doing it in 2010.
Like, it drives me crazy training on race tires. Like, I want my race tires to be really fresh and nice. Sorry, Cam, go ahead.
No, it's all right. I was getting excited about what Chris was saying with the training wheels, because I reckon we need to bring that back. I remember I had training wheels, like really heavy Fulcrum 7s with Schwalbe marathons. Yeah. And I used to go do the Hell Ride, and the Hell Ride was so much harder. But hey, if you keep doing it with the same setup, I actually remember doing the Hell Ride and rolling turns, and actually I'm like, hey, wait a sec here. There's actually something to this from a training adaptation perspective.
Now that we were talking about wheels, and Jeff and Cam, you've been riding heaps of different wheel sets. I want to pick your brain, and sorry for the people that get sick of tire chat, because I complain about it with gravel, is the width. The internal width, and then what tire width do you guys think is optimal? Because I've been testing, trying out a set of wheels that have a 28 mil internal front, which is a gravel rim. Yeah. And so the range of measured width that people are using on the road now is huge. Like, I put a 30 on that, it's measuring 34. If I have a narrower rim, like maybe the one that comes on the Polygon, and I put a 20, even I put a 28, that might only measure 27 or 28 mil wide. So you've got this huge span. Like, where are you guys sitting? Are you going to be able to, a dream race bike, you want to have the fastest setup for training and racing, you got one width. What are you guys running, measured?
Yeah, I've explored this topic quite a bit. So the short answer is you have to obey the rule of 105. So the outside width of the tire when it's inflated on the rim is, well, I should approach it the other way. The outside width of the rim needs to be 105% of the width of the tire once inflated on the rim. So that's optimal aerodynamics. This makes a much bigger difference than people realize. I made a whole video devoted just to this, like, very, very niche topic. Not because I thought it was going to explode and everyone's going to watch it, but for those people who are interested in these, like, marginal gains, this is actually, like, bigger than people realize. So whatever you're running, I think that you have to get really close to that rule of 105. Rim slightly bigger than the tire. So for me, everything beyond that is what's your intention, what's the road surface you're on. So if you are on, like, a track, let's just go to extremes. You're on, like, perfectly fresh pavement or a track, you're going to want to go narrower because it is more aerodynamic. And you're not so concerned about hitting a pothole and increasing your rolling resistance or having just an uncomfortable ride. So you go narrower. You can also have higher pressures. If you're on anything else, you want to start to go wider. So let me define some of these things. Narrower, I think that, first of all, you'd be hard pressed to find really narrow rims these days, even for like, really high quality pavement or track. So I think that 26, 28 tires is really on the small end, maybe 24. Track is, I shouldn't use track as an example. That's like a whole different beast. But 28 is kind of the standard. But I think it's just getting bigger. We've learned, right, back from, speaking of us old codgers racing, we used to run 120 PSI on like 23 millimeter tires. So where I would go for the racing that I do, crit racing, some of the conditions here in California aren't so great. I think that I wouldn't go quite to that 28 millimeter internal. That's huge. But what you're getting when you go larger is a very small penalty in aerodynamics because it's just wider frontal area in exchange for this big contact patch.
Can I just dig in there? Have you with your aero sensor measured? Because I'm struggling to find data on like if you go from like relatively narrow now, a measured width of 28 mil on the front is actually relatively narrow if you're running a tubeless tire with most of the modern rims. So like from let's say a measured width of a 28 to a 32, 33. Is it like a couple of watts
You're talking
a high
aerodynamics?
race speed? Yeah,
Purely
just
aerodynamics?
that aerodynamic penalty. Or is it really significant? Have you ever been able to measure it or test it?
I have not. I know that Dylan Johnson has. He quoted something. God, it might have been on the last podcast. I can't remember where I heard that from him, but he did measure the aerodynamic penalty in a wind tunnel is where he did it, of having a larger frontal area of like a larger tire.
I do remember he definitely did it for his felt gravel setup for.
He did it for his gravel bikes. Yeah.
I just always struggled to actually put a number on that, because I've been setting mine up. I'll have 32, 33, 34 measured width on the front, and I'm going, right, that's got to be slow aerodynamically. It's so wide.
It is, but it's,
I don't
it's
have a
not,
number.
Right, I can't produce one either because I haven't tested it. But I guess to the point I was making is like, to me that doesn't matter because we're not talking about it's not 20 watts or something like that. And the benefit that you're going to get in a corner, set aside the bad pavement, right? It's way more comfortable on better pavement. The rolling resistance is better on bad pavement with larger tires, higher volume tires. But just that contact patch, that area that's in contact with the ground determines grip. And if you're confident in the corners in a crit, we spend most of the time entering, exiting, or navigating a corner. That's like most of crit racing. And if you have a larger contact patch, then yeah, like I will give up whatever the aerodynamic penalty is. It's not much. It's well worth the comfort and the grip that you're going to have in corners. So for me, super long-winded way of saying, I think that the reserves that I use are great. I even have another set of wheels that I've been using that I'm going to make a whole video about, Rule 6, that have not quite the gravel level, but they're somewhere in between. I think that they're like 26 internal. They turn my 30s into 33 and a halves when they're inflated.
Isn't that what you're trying, Jesse?
We may be testing the same wheels, but
oh, seriously?
I don't want this to turn into like I'm just testing them. I'm not advertising for them. So
okay.
Yes, but more because I'm not convinced yet that essentially a gravel rim is optimal for roads. I'm still in the testing.
So where did you land, Jeff, then on the tire width? Sorry, I might have missed that.
30. Yeah, no, that's right. I talk a lot. I got there at the very end. So 30s are on the Rule 6 that I've been using, and they inflate to like 33 and a half. But then my reserves that I also like, they're a little bit narrower. They have 28s, and they go up to like, I think 31 or something like that. Reserves, so people will know what that is. So
they're the reserve 44s? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they are. I think their internal rim width's down around the 23s on that. They're probably due a refresh, I think. But
I just want to emphasize as well, just to make a point for people listening, is like we have to be talking about measured width because the stated width on the tire has never been more irrelevant because you could have a 4 or 5 mil difference in measured width depending on what rim you're putting on. So any serious, semi-serious road cyclist should just buy a pair of those calipers because if you're getting into any of this at any level, you need to be measuring it.
because that then massively affects the actual PSI that you should be prescribed to be putting into the tire in the end anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because that is recommended on measured width. Yeah. Okay.
Cam, you're still rolling around on bloody tubes and 23s, aren't you? What's going on?
No.
Yeah, I tell you what I stupidly did. I got a whole bunch of tubes and tyres off Vittoria Corsa Pros. And I just liked the 26s at the time. This was last year, and I've still got so many of them, and I've been testing with so many of them. I kind of feel like I'm trapped in this 26 land when I'm seeing all this content that I'm actually on the wrong tyres. I'm like, I need to get out of this. But because of all these other content projects that I've got, which have been with the same tyres and tubes, I've just kind of been running with it. So I'm not a good person to talk to regarding this. But what I found interesting, though, I'll tell you, is at the Tour de France. I was there recently and seeing Visma Lisa bike run 29s on there. They have the reserve wheels as well, I believe. Something interesting actually when I was looking at their bikes, I wanted to speak to somebody about this, but there was no one around to ask, is they were running DT Swiss 240 hubs, and I'm like, why are they running the 240s? I thought the 180s were better. Maybe one of you guys know the answer to that. But I was doing some research after it, why they've created this 29 profile, and apparently it works so cohesively with that particular wheel that they use. Then they're so dialed in on aerodynamics, they just created this tyre that was, 1 millimetre wider. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. It just goes to show how much attention, these pro teams are paying to this.
Just to your comment, Jesse, about what a mainstream brand's going to do, wheel brand's going to do to combat the rise of these Chinese things. That's the other one, is they're partnering with Tyre brands, and they're really going to sell you the fact that this reserve wheel and this Vittoria 29 are a match made in heaven, and you will have an everlasting honeymoon in Hawaii, and it's perfect. It's going to fit Jeff's rule of 105. It's going to be perfect rolling resistance, and that's going to be the push, because you've seen, am I right in saying Zip and Michelin? I think that's right. Goodyear, sorry.
One, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously you got Roval with their tyres, and you're going to see more of those tyres and wheel manufacturers trying to sell you the package as another feature over.
But I do think there's some validity in that, because I'm at the stage where I'm asking Jeff if he's got data from his aero sensor, because a lot of these Chinese brands, you're having to make all these assumptions about, I think this is going to be faster, and this is their rim profile, I'll run this tire, and you're kind of just crossing your fingers and hoping that it's fast, and then trying to see what it feels like and what your speed is out on the road, because they don't really have the money to actually do testing. So like with reserves, for example, if they've had these things tested and do think that this tire that they've partnered with is faster, at least you have confidence that there is numbers there. It was designed that way, not just doing what we're essentially doing.
Do you, again, just coming back to the sort of US crit scene, is the 28 the standard, or are we now the 30 the standard?
Yeah, 28's like the minimum. You don't see anybody running 26s or 24s other than Cam. Sorry, buddy.
I know.
Maybe
I know.
Yeah, we'll get on to Cam's crit comeback. I think we know what step one's going to be.
Yeah.
So here's the thing, like the comment about the 29s. So you can't change the rim width, right? Once you have a set of wheels, like you can't change that, but you can change the tire. So the 29s are a match made in heaven on the beach in Hawaii, whatever you said, Chris. And you can't change anything except the tire to get that correct match. So yeah, I think you're right. There's something there with like brands, wheel manufacturer brands partnering with tire manufacturing brands to really optimize that. Because otherwise, it's really hard to find the optimal setup unless you're deep into some YouTube video that I've made about like some niche, rule of 105, for example. But it really does matter, like the marginal gain for that aerodynamic profile made by the tire and rim is more than people think.
Do you want to go more into tires, Jesse, or have you got your feel?
No, I'm just trying to. This is my question. It's not what's your FTP anymore. It's what's your measured width on the front there? That's my new question.
What are you talking about?
Uh-oh, yeah.
No, not measured length, just the measured width.
Measured girth, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you had a chance to have a quick think about this, Jeff, but I like the idea of what's your perfect crit bike in 2024? Specifically, maybe for someone getting into it and, because I think I think that it's a really good time to sort of get into racing. There's enough happening. There's a good buzz about it. And I think the equipment side of it's good. Would you have any thoughts on? I mean, you can go nuts on brands, doesn't bother us.
Yeah. Any specific brand you call out, everyone's going to call you a shill. So I'll try to stay away from specific brands. But you're kind of asked two questions. So like somebody just getting in, or like the ultimate price doesn't matter setup?
Mate, potentially both.
Yeah, I'll be quick.
I'd love to hear money doesn't matter. I'll be honest. I would love to hear that.
Okay. So let's save the better for last then. I think if you're just getting into it, we talked already for a bit about how these Chinese companies are really come a long way. I would not spend top dollar on a name brand wheel set. And even now, frames. I think so. First of all, frames are like the last thing that you should be considering when you're thinking about performance, because there are differences in performance, but they're so small and you pay such a premium for that. The biggest thing is going to be geometry. So if you can save a little bit of money to get a proper fit and you're getting into the sport, that would be huge. Make sure that you're going to get a bike that properly fits you. You're going to maximize the amount of power that you can deliver into the bike. So that's number one. And I would just get one of these, these like open mold Chinese brands that is going to be a fifth the cost of one of the name brand bikes. And I would pair that with again, I'm trying not to use brands, but I would get one of these overseas wheels too. And then I would get like 105 or Force, because like Di2 105 is fantastic and it's relatively inexpensive compared to like Dura-Ace. What you're paying for with Dura-Ace is not durability. In fact, it's less durable. It's more premium materials that are softer. You're paying for weight. There's big weight savings with Dura-Ace, but that is like so far out there in terms of performance. So yeah, Chinese frame, Chinese wheels, like 105 Di2 or SRAM. Chris, did you want to?
I was just thinking, just in terms of the frame. So I'm happy to talk about brands. That doesn't bother me, but like a full out aero frame. So like aero tubed, or more of a one bike to do it all type offering.
Yeah, if we're talking about just crit racing, this is where it gets a little weird, because you can, marginal gains, you can go off into the weeds. Like, not all crit races are the same. Is it a really technical crit? Is it a Southern California four-corner office park crit? Those are completely different things. But if you're doing more accelerating,
for your NorCal season,
for the whole NorCal season, yeah, we have pretty technical crits with hills and stuff. So I would be a little bit more mindful of the weight. So I wouldn't get those super deep wheels that are not going to be good in crosswinds, by the way. And I also wouldn't get like the big chunky frame that is also going to have a weight penalty, because one thing I've learned in doing all these tests is just because it looks aero doesn't mean it is aero. So there's that too. So I would get more of an all-around thing, pay a bit more attention to the weight, because NorCal crits are real spicy with accelerations and hills and crosswinds and things like that. So yeah, more of like an all-around. I would think about the rule of 105, and I would put really high. I'll do a name drop now. I'll just do Continental GP 5000s tubeless, because I am familiar with them. I like them. They perform well. They even last a long time. Like, they're more durable than people give them credit for too. So I'd put those on there. I would have something. Can I
go back to the frame, Jeff?
Yeah.
Because you said you would put on. Did you say open mold? Like what? Because like what do you? Would you go full open mold, or would you want something coming from a brand?
Something coming from a brand, certainly, but I wouldn't buy like a Specialized or a Trek or something, because they're so expensive. I would get something from like WindSpace or one of these yeah, one of these overseas brands that oftentimes is making this stuff in the same factory. And yeah, again, like maybe the warranty is not as good, maybe the crash replacement's not as good. Those are considerations, but man, they're so cheap.
Do you think? Sorry, just to derail your spec list. Do you feel like there's a potential kind of branding issue, like a buyer's regret thing? Because I started off racing on a non-name brand bike, an Azuri, and when I started actually racing more, the only thing I ever wanted to do was get on a name brand bike, was get off that onto a Giant or something. And so I always hesitate. Like, yeah, the value's good, but I think there are a lot of people, if they haven't had a name brand bike first, that might regret getting the non-brand option just from a...
Hop on a friend's bike or go to the local retailer and ask if you could take it for a spin. I'm sure they'll be happy to let you do that and see for yourself. I mean, it's a lot of this stuff on like feel. It's why I try not to go too crazy into the feel, because everyone's going to call you a shill and a liar, but it's like a subjective thing, you know? It's like a certain bike might feel better to some people than it does other people.
Sorry, I meant absolutely not from a performance point of view, just because generally someone newer into the sport, you won't be happy until you've ridden a name brand bike, and then maybe your next purchase, you go back and you go, okay, I'll get a wind space. That was just my experience. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't relate. I think if I can save money and get the same amount of performance, I'm a happy guy.
Okay, fair enough.
But everyone's mileage might vary, right? So like go in and have a ride on the SL17 or whatever they're at now, and
like for me where I'm at now, I'm 100% with you. Like I'm on a essentially a no-name.
But for people
bike,
getting into the sport, they might like that, or just the assurance that like this, they have some office somewhere in the United States and I can call customer service. Like that might be worth the extra money for some people. I don't want to shame people for like that's the last thing I want to do. You're right. More, if it makes you ride more, it's the right choice. But I think what I've learned in my testing is just from a performance standpoint, you're not getting a whole lot, if anything, by spending more money on the name brand stuff. You don't get a complete bike many times with these overseas brands, right? You buy the frame and then you can build it up the way you want it. That's another thing that's worth talking about, is like you have to build a bike or hire somebody to build your bike for you. SRAM makes it easy, by the way, with wireless. But what am I missing? We talked wheels. I would get something with pretty big internals to put on my 30s or 32s and get that rule of 105. Yeah, what am I missing? I think we've talked about everything. Saddle's a very individual choice.
I've got a question for you, Jeff. What about bar width? Because obviously we're going narrow and narrow and narrow, and you sort of led that whole pitch with getting comfortable on the bike and being able to deliver more power. What are your thoughts on somebody maybe just getting into the crits that's maybe on a stock bike where it's a 42, going to a 38, or I think BMC's Team Machine R now is you have to have a 36 at the top, which I rode, and I was like, I enjoyed it, but I'm like, geez, my neck and my shoulders after 2 or 3 hours were getting a bit sore.
Right, you have broad shoulders too. Like I ran 42s forever, and then I got 40s, and I was like, oh, this feels kind of cool. And then I got the Envies, which are 37 on top and 42 on the bottom. So it's really like kind of the best of both. I really like that setup that I have on my team bike. Those are great. They take a little bit of getting used to because it handles a little differently. But man, I tell you something, like I went back to riding some of the older bikes I have in my garage that are 42s, and I was like, I kind of like the way this feels. Like it just feels like it opens you up a little bit. Call me old school, but I don't know about this trend going towards 36 or whatever we're at. Like I really like the wide feeling. It felt great. Has a lot to do with your shoulder width, I think. But I made a video that was comparing the speed between my 37s on the top and then my standard. I think they measure 42 on the top, and I saw no difference essentially.
Do you think sprinting? Because I hear this one a bit, like, oh, the reason to hang on to wider bars is because you've got a better center of gravity or some shit when you're sprinting. Is that maybe? I mean, you're probably the person to ask, Jeff, in that space. Have you sprinted on 36s and gone, Jesus, I can't crank out the power here?
I haven't used like proper 36s that don't flare out. You're right. My Envies are 37s measured hood to hood, but in the drops they're 42s again. So I kind of have the same feeling. My concern with the flared bars, and I think it was unwarranted now that I've been on them for a year, is like, am I going to hook everything in a crit? You guys know in a crit, it's like last couple laps, like you're just like leaning on people the whole time, right? And I see people in the hoods in the last lap of a crit at a high level. I'm like, you must be out of your mind, because if something hooks your bar, whether it's somebody's arm or like their hip or anything, like you are just going to introduce yourself to the pavement immediately. Like no chance. So that was my concern, but just be in the drops where you should be, and kind of squashes that fear that I had. But yeah, to answer your question, I have not done like a proper sprint on like actual like 36s in the drops. The handling is weird. I'm not saying it's worse or better. It feels weird. I don't feel like I have that same like sprint mechanic where I'm pulling with my arm and pushing with my leg on opposite sides. Because really when I'm sprinting, like it's a full body thing, right? My legs aren't capable of 1500 watts, but my legs, my arms, my core, my neck, my back, every single muscle is capable of producing that. And I'm afraid that if I go really narrow, maybe I'm not. It's a good video concept, actually. Like, throw on the 36s, what's my max power?
Do you tinker much with your position? Jesse was kind of taking the piss out of me for my very upright position the other week. And it's kind of forced me to reassess how, certainly like in a race scenario or a time trial scenario when you might be in a breakaway or something like that, what's the front end of your bike? Are you sort of slammed and long, or are you trying to find a more comfortable position, like a middle ground?
Yeah, good question. My position on the bike, so like, just to be clear, my bike geometry never changes. I go copy paste every year. I've done a couple of touch-ups to make sure that hasn't changed. I've gotten professional fits over the years, but the bike itself doesn't change year to year. My position on the bike changes moment to moment in a race, like 100%. You know, let's take the extremes, right? I'm climbing, I'm doing whatever is allowing me to be most comfortable, produce the most power. Zero regard for aerodynamics, because it doesn't matter. Once you're above 8-10%, aerodynamics don't matter anymore. The other end of the spectrum, I'm bridging to a breakaway in a crit, right? And I'm going 34, 35 miles an hour. Like, I am adopting an unsustainable position. And you make sure that you can adopt that. It doesn't have to be for a long period of time, but make sure your equipment's going to allow you to do that. I actually spent time in a wind tunnel finding this position. I was super lucky, and I got to spend time back when Specialized and I were working together quite a bit. I spent time in their wind tunnel, and I worked on like sprinting position, and then I also worked on this extreme like bridging to a breakaway position. And yeah, it's not something that you can adopt all day, but if you can do it for, you know, a minute or even 30 seconds and make a lot of power, and then once you're there, you've made the bridge effort, you can get back into a more sustainable position, open your lungs up a little bit. Like, those are the extremes, but I'm constantly changing in a race, right? If I'm sitting in the draft in a crit, like, I don't really have much regard for aerodynamics. If I'm popping out just to move up, I might get in that position for 4 or 5 seconds, pass somebody, and then get back up, because you're doing, it might not seem like much, but you're doing, you know, it's like a 375 watt effort instead of a 425 watt effort. And that's significant, right? That's like above threshold versus below threshold. Like, those are huge.
When you were in the wind tunnel then, like, to get your position dialed in, did you essentially move the placement of the bars more extreme to pull your body into that position? So you're in there more of the time? Or was it actually keep the handlebars more in a relaxed position and then just totally adjust how you're holding yourself? Because there's two kind of, that's that approach that Chris and I have been kind of going back and forth with what's the best.
Right. No, that's a good question. And yeah, my equipment doesn't change. I am changing my body on the bike. And this is a different conversation for triathletes and time trialists, right? Because they are changing their equipment instead to optimize their position. But in the case of, you need to have something that allows you to do both. You're climbing, you have to be comfortable. You're in that super aggressive crit bridging position, you have to be able to adopt that position as well. So it's all about your position on the bike. And it's a huge difference. Like things that people don't think about that I learned in the wind tunnel is I was sprinting and I was doing what I normally do when I sprint, which is like every once in a while I look under my shoulder to see if somebody's coming. It's almost just like habit at this point. So I'm sprinting and I'm putting my head down, and the tech in the wind tunnel is like, don't do that. And I said, what do you mean don't do that? He's like, the helmet is designed to be fast like this, not like this. And like when you're facing a 40-mile-an-hour headwind, sorry, whatever that is in kilometers per hour, 70 or something like that, it's really significant. It's like 100 watts, right? When you're going that fast, it's like 100 or 200 watts. So he's like, yeah, try to keep your head straight. But like at a certain point, you have to see what's going on. So anyway, yeah, that's a whole other topic. But
now that we're on racing, Cam, I've got the most general question for you. So sorry in advance. But you're looking at getting back into some racing too. And we've seen here, especially in the Sydney scene, that the state racing and the local racing, the attendance numbers have been going down since COVID and haven't really bounced back yet. But group ride numbers, go out on a Saturday ride, club rides, they're all bumping up. So like for you that's getting back into racing, and then also if you've chatting to other people that are maybe considering racing, like do you have any thoughts on how we can get people from the group ride, from the social ride, to pin a number on for the first time?
Well, that's a big question, and that one wasn't on the list, Jesse. I didn't prepare for that one. Yeah, look, I don't know. I have scratched my head. The crit numbers in Melbourne when I was racing down there, 2017 and 18, were starting to dwindle then. This was off the back of years and years of, you rock up to Sandown Raceway on a Tuesday, and it was sort of like St Kilda versus Caulfield Carnegie, and you'd get like 60, 70 there every Tuesday, and it was just going nuts. And when I left 17, 18, you're going some Tuesdays and there'd be like 20 or 25 in A grade. You're like, what's going on? And I remember at the time people were speculating that it was like the rise of social media. So to get respect now on the road, it was like, you can just have an Instagram account and, wear your map kit and look really cool. And you didn't have to go and earn, your respect by going from E grade, doing latte laps, into, D grade, and made it to C grade. Oh, you made it to C grade, and that was chat in the bunch. And this was whether this is true or not, I don't know. And also the rise.
This is interesting. I haven't heard the. This is.
You like this chat?
I'm on this.
And then the rise of Zwifting, of course. People can get their hit out, their race. Indoors. And I know Melbourne in particular, like the growth of that city, it went from 4 million to almost 5 million very, very quickly. And the roads got very, very intense. And I was just speaking to somebody, we've got a couple of RCA members up here just yesterday. The growth of gravel in Melbourne's huge because, I think people are just trying to get off the roads. The roads are so intense. So, I don't see what you see. Like, we've got a small community here, so our bunch is kind of like, I know pretty much everyone in the local bunch. It does balloon over, Chris is coming up here soon, so we get a lot of people from Sydney, Melbourne that come up, so it balloons over the summer period. And so, yeah, that's a bit of context in terms of what's been speculated in the past. But right now, as somebody getting into it, I feel like I'm definitely on the outer. But I'm looking forward to getting back into it because it keeps you honest. And I've kind of been sitting in this kind of like, in terms of if you're looking at your fitness out of 10, I reckon in this, between the 6 to 8 fitness category for like the last number of years because you're focused on other areas. But when you're racing, you're kind of that 9 to 10 category and you feel really good, you know what I mean? And that's what I'm looking forward to with getting back into racing.
Well, that's interesting then. So your motivation for coming back into it maybe is a kind of a parallel with other people. Are you doing it, like, what's the motivation? Is it because you just want something to train for and then the race is the outlet? Or do you really love racing and you're looking forward to getting back into it? Or maybe you're just doing it because it's good for YouTube? Like,
definitely not because it's good. One thing I realized actually when I was doing like crit racing, I had this goal when I first started my YouTube channel. I wanted to try and win an A grade criterium, which I've never done and I never did. And I tried really hard. I actually remember some Yes, exactly right. So maybe that's like the little voice in the back of your head. You're 43 now. You maybe got another few years where you can go down and do it. But I think I've always enjoyed racing. I've always found it challenging to, even in Melbourne, just because of family logistics, having kids and a wife that wants, she's got her own job as well and got her own hobby with surfing. So it's very logistical. But when I moved up here, there's not a lot of racing that goes on. And when you do have racing, it's, quite often they'll merge A and B grades and stuff like that. So it's not the same kind of like feel as going to a Glenvale or a Sandown. But I'm like, and I have travelled down to Brisbane a bit, which is like a 2-hour drive for me. So 4 hours there and back, and it consumes most of your Saturday. But I think that's why when I moved here, the racing and the appetite to race faded out because of the location of where I'm at. But I've gotten to a point now where my kids are getting older. I've set up I've been working on a business which is a little less time consuming now, and I can focus more on, because I know for me, so I made it through the ranks in the crits, right? And I got to A grade. I'm like, man, these guys are strong. Like for me to get fit in A grade, I'm going to have to work really hard, which I did. But then kind of like when you drop out of it and you lose your fitness, you know how hard it is to get back to that level of fitness. So I think I have awareness of what it takes for me to get to that level of fitness and what's required. And that's why I kind of haven't focused on it to date. And I think maybe I'd be interested to hear you guys as well in Sydney. Like, you see these guys go through the grades and they get to A grade and they go, oh, gee, this is ridiculous. And then maybe you never see them again. And that's probably been partially my story as well.
But that competitive itch, do you feel like that doesn't really get scratched just by the group rides? Because that's where I feel like the gap gets made up, is you have so many guys on these group rides, and perhaps that's just satisfying enough for them. There's no need. Why would you pin a number on?
Yeah, you don't get the competitive. If you've got a competitive itch, I don't think the group ride gives it to you. The group ride gives you the socialisation, the endorphins. There's a little bit of competitiveness in there, and there's nothing more than I love doing the local group ride here on a Saturday. And I know this is the same for a lot of people. Doing their group ride, you have a coffee, you're home at 9, 10 o'clock, you've done 3-4 hours, and then you've got the rest of your day. So I completely get that, but I don't think for me that it's giving me what I want, and that is maybe one day I can get up for at least on a podium of an A grade crit. So I guess that's my little hidden motivation. But I think if the races if I was more local, I would get to them. And I'm not answering your question. I understand that. I don't know why the race numbers are dwindling. I mean, what do you think, Jesse?
That's why I'm asking you.
At a loss.
I am kind of at a loss. I mean, I get it. I'm more sympathetic to the people that don't race. You go do a Wednesday morning, Friday morning club ride, big bunch on the Saturday, and or as you said, maybe you just hop on Zwift and that gives you your adrenaline rush if you're doing a Zwift race. And I mean, why would you pin a number on? The other thing that does come to mind is perhaps danger. I don't know, Jeff, if you've seen anything. Has the perceived danger of these Cat 3, 4, 5s, do you think that's driving people away, even though technically that would have always been the case?
It was always there, and I touched on this a little bit. I think it's fading a little bit more now, this post-lockdown COVID like fitness that people had, but no pack riding skills. I think that was a thing for a while, and there was both a perception that there was a lot of crashes, but it was based in reality. I feel like there were a lot more crashes after the lockdown was over. Everyone was doing crazy, like solo training miles, Zwift races, fitness. People were riding faster than ever, but it's like put them in a pack, approach a corner at 32 miles an hour, and it's like carbon explosion, So I think that does drive some people away. I get a lot of comments in my YouTube videos, people saying like, yeah, I love racing, but I'd never do it again. It's too dangerous. And like, fair. Like, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I wish it wasn't part of the sport. But also it wouldn't be as exciting if, like, the risk of danger is what makes part of the appeal and part of the excitement, right? Whether you want to admit that or not, I think that's part of the appeal, is like, a Zwift race maybe doesn't quite scratch that itch. A group ride doesn't maybe quite scratch that itch, but like when everyone pins a number, it's a different level, and the stakes are a little bit higher and the risk is a little bit higher, but also the reward is higher just for like a, clout, if nothing else.
100%. Just to clarify, are you seeing a similar thing at least in NorCal? What's race attendance like? It might not be the same as Australia, where it seems to be dropping.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not good. It's been kind of plateaued for the last few years, like ever since. Well, even before COVID. It just wasn't. When I first got into the sport, like, they were full fields. Like, you had to register early, otherwise it would fill up. That hasn't been a thing for, God, I mean, 10 years, 12 years even. It hasn't been a thing. And then COVID didn't help. And now it's just kind of seen a plateau. I'm doing everything I can to boost numbers, right? I love this sport, and part of my drive is to get more people racing because I think it's a wonderful sport. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. People don't understand the sport, and also people are risk averse. They don't want to go out and crash their bike.
Indoor cycling. Yep. We're going to go there because I watched your garage tour, the indoor setup thing. I love those videos. I think they're sick. But Chris is
because you have a trainer at home. No,
I have not. I don't. I have a trainer that sits in my garage.
It's so weird.
It's just kind of that, like, organization setup stuff. I don't like it.
I was like, it's never going to be this clean again. I better grab the camera and make a video really fast.
Yeah, but Chris is trying to. He's look at him. He's trying to delay me. Chris has got it. I don't know how much we want to say, Chris.
Oh no, you can say.
He's got it. There was a good drop from Zwift, a good indoor setup. So they've given him the Zwift package, the indoor setup, the Zwift bike and the trainer and all the bits. It's still sitting in the box, which I've been giving him shit for. So
Cam 2, it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, it was because I was waiting to do this. I was waiting to do this chat.
Okay, so this is the chat, right?
This is the reveal, is it?
This is the reveal.
There's a box behind you.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Jeff, like, how much have you been using indoor training? How do you incorporate it? Like, I'm interested to know, like, what you've been doing with it, and then if we.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can talk a little bit.
Sorry,
about
can
this.
I just preface, like, more specifically the question I have, because there's a few different approaches that indoor and outdoor kind of riders that do both mix it up. You've got, like, as a coach, I see this too. You've got the, I have my training plan, whatever it is, and if it's raining, I just do whatever I was going to do on the road indoors. So you've got the just stick it out. You've got the other camp, which if it's raining or weather's bad or they don't have time, they got to do an indoor ride. They might move a session around and they're just using it as a bridge. Just hop on for an hour and a half, just to keep the legs moving, and then save the important stuff for outside. And then you've got perhaps the third camp, which they're doing all the important workouts indoors because it's really controlled and it's really structured. And then outdoors, they might just be doing their endurance rides. Like, how have you been incorporating the indoor setup?
Yeah. No, good question. Okay. So I personally, I don't use the indoor bike unless the weather's bad, because I like to ride my bike outdoors and have fantastic weather here in California most of the time. Winter months, I'll get on the trainer, and I don't generally stay on the trainer for longer than about 2 hours. But the funny thing is like, you can do a 3-hour outdoor ride in 2 hours on the indoor trainer. A lot of people don't realize, if you go to like Strava, I wanted to make a video about this exact topic.
That's a very controversial. Sorry, go ahead, but yeah.
No, I swear, you can look at, and I've done this, you can look on your Strava and it can break your effort down in terms of zones, right? And, you know, I tell one of my athletes, okay, hey, you know, do what the training plan says, go out and knock out a 2-hour zone 2 ride. And then what they'll end up doing is going out and they'll ride for 2 hours, but they only spend like 70 minutes in zone 2. They'll spend 10 of it in zone 3 or 4, chasing their friends around or whatever. And then they'll spend a lot of time kind of noodling around. Okay, I'm getting warmed up. Okay, there's a red light. Oh, I have to slow down for this corner. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're trying to stick to a plan, without question, indoor is a higher quality workout. The only question is whether or not you can endure sitting on the trainer for extended periods of time. Because if you're doing 12, 15, 18, 20 hours a week, like all on a trainer, that's hard. That takes a special type of motivation. But I think indoor is the highest quality workout you can do. So in the winter months, I'm full of motivation. I'm looking forward to racing, and I can generally hop on the trainer and knock out like 2 hours at zone 2, and I can put on a show or whatever. I think it's important to have extracurriculars, especially for those lower intensity rides, because it makes the hours tick by. But yeah, for some people, they'd rather go out and ride in the rain. And I think it's just a question of the individual. But I think all things being equal, I urge my athletes to hit the target numbers. And indoors, it's just much more efficient. You can do it in a faster period of time.
I asked you a question, Jeff, because I'm about to do a full indoor. The video that you did, I'm planning on doing that. In fact, spoiler alert, I'm going to be called the biggest sellout even though Zwift aren't paying me. I'm painting my whole wall inside my garage the Zwift color with a big Zwift logo. Like I'm going full tilt. I'm going to have a sauna in there. I've got the Zwift bike. I'm going like full tilt. So,
be careful, Cam. Chris will go up for holidays. You'll never get rid of him with this setup.
Come and indoor train. And look, this is part of wanting to get fit again. Like I realise, the summer for us is also the rain season. So we have to train more indoors. Last year we were renovating and the shed was just full of shit. It was just gross. And I was in the indoor trainer. It was humid. There was no aircon. I was just dripping. I'm like, is it FML? Thinking FML, yeah. And I kind of like basically it was like the cherry on top of a whole sequence of events, and I kind of like took 3 months just taking it really easy and not worrying about cycling too much. And I thought, all right, if I really want to get serious, I've got to do the full setup. So the question is, like, the concern that I have is I spend all this money and doing this indoor setup. Is it going to make me motivated to go into that room and ride more? So the question is, does it for you?
Remove the barriers. Actually, two things. Remove the barriers, like have the shoes ready, the bottles mixed, like have everything ready. Because if you're like me, you're going to find a reason not to get on the trainer and do a ride after you have had several rainy days in a row and you're logging a lot of indoor miles. That's number one. Number two, the number one thing that slows people down on the trainer and makes their workouts essentially useless is not cooling themselves properly. I have so many people who are like, I did this outdoor FTP test and I had a 240 watt FTP and then I went indoors and it's 175. What's going on? I'm like, no fans, right? Like I call it every single time. They're like, yeah, why? I have a window open. I'm like, your body is spending all of its energy just to cool itself and you're not getting quality workouts. You're adapting yourself to hot environments. That's cool. But you're not actually like hitting power targets. So invest in orange Zwift colored fans if you need to, Cam. Whatever it takes.
That far. Yeah.
If money, can I ask, if money's no object, all right, with this setup, well, whatever, yeah, whatever. But in terms of, you talked about peripherals, get the peripherals right. So talk me through this. So I've got my Zwift bike, okay, and I've got my fan, great fan. Am I going to go for 2 screens? So on Zwift, let's say I'm going to do 2 hours endurance on Zwift. So do I have the Apple TV or maybe the iPad up with Zwift on, and then I do a nice setup where I get a Kogan, so that's a cheaper brand like TV or something, and have Netflix then on the main big screen. And so I've got my sort of Strava sort of avatar or whatever it is down here, and then I've got my peripheral going here, and then sort of headphones on. Is that the best take my mind off what I'm doing setup, or should I flick it the other way around? Or do I need more screens? Do I need 10 screens? What do I need?
That's my plan. So I've actually the first step of the process, I've had a big TV installed right in front of me. So the plan is to have Zwift there. And I should probably say the reason why I've gone all in on Zwift, because RCA, we'd have like a big international community. So we're doing like Zwift rides now, like we're doing 2 or 3 a week. And I'm looking at Zwift and we're talking on the companion app, but there's kind of like, I am still a little bit bored. So I thought if I could have my laptop there as well, be playing the Nero show, watching that, Zwift in the background up the top, and I've got my companion app here. The hour or hour and a half is just going to go like that. That's what I'm thinking.
No. There is a genetic mutation, I swear to God, that allow people to tolerate Zwift or not. And you've either got it or you don't. And I feel like Chris doesn't have it. So you can set up as many screens as you want. I don't think you're going to be...
screens.
You're going to be doing it.
I'm doing a DC Rainmaker. I'm getting the Vision Pros. I'm going full immersive.
I do have a tip, because I did go through an indoor training phase and kind of worked for a bit. Mirrors. Sounds really vain, but there's a reason why gyms are all covered in mirrors. Being able to see yourself riding in the hurt box during a hard workout does help the time go faster. Jeff, do you have a mirror in your, can't remember, in your garage? Can you see yourself riding?
I don't. Yeah.
Okay.
Have you seen me? I don't want to see any more of this. No, I don't have a mirror.
If you want to try, set one up, and I swear it'll make the time go faster.
So I have, to answer Chris's question, I have on like the Zone 2 ride that you set up, I have the Office reruns or whatever on the screen in front of me. And then if it's Zwift or if it's whatever training platform or just some custom workout you've installed, that can just be on your phone communicating with your smart trainer because you don't really need to look at anything, right? And then obviously if you're like in a Zwift race or if it's like a social thing, you're in a virtual group ride, then have the big screen real estate used for the folks you're riding with or focusing on their race. Like that's when it makes sense. But 100%, if it's just like a Zone 2 ride, like I am not watching the Zwift universe, you know, like I'm watching a TV show and that is on mute and it is just locked into whatever erg setting I want it to be at.
But that's where I have the question on, well, what sessions, like Chris, you got your training, Dan gives you your training. Like, what ones are you going to do indoors? Do you go, I'm just going to do the endurance indoors, do my threshold in Centennial Park, or opposite? What's...
Yeah, that's basically the way I see it. Yes. Essentially the endurance days in here, and nothing. I can't see myself doing anything over a 10-minute effort in here.
30/30s and VO2 max intervals.
Yes.
I reckon that's kind of good on the trainer because you can get a really solid session in for an hour and then you're done. And then you take your long, nice endurance rides where you can look at nature outside.
So one problem I have, I agree. I think it has to do with your trainer. I had one of the, I think it was the Taxa Neo where your bike goes on it. And that like responded to the erg mode immediately. The one I have in the Stages SB20, it has this massive flywheel that weighs 1,000 pounds and it responds slowly to the erg mode. It's kind of weird. So if I'm doing the 30/30s, it's actually not that quality of a workout because it takes a minute to spin up and then it takes a minute to spin down. And it's like, you look at the 30/30s and it's just kind of like this wave. Like the training adaptation might be similar, but it's not exactly what the plan prescribes. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind. I think it's trainer dependent. But yeah, I agree. Like I think that those high quality, very focused workouts are best for the indoor trainer. As long as you don't have to get out of the saddle, because remember, like most trainers are locked in place. That was one of my earliest videos I made that went viral-ish. That had like several 100,000 views or something, where I talked about why sprinting on a trainer sucks. Because the bike is static, it's stationary, and you stand up and it's like, we were talking about handlebars earlier. If the bike doesn't do the thing that bikes do, your whole body's like, what? Like you can't coordinate that sprint effort. Anyway.
I agree, Cam and Jeff too. Like when I was using it, once I had the fan set up right, I was fine to get on there for like a 45-minute session. I remember when I was training for some time trial, maybe it was nationals, I'd get on once every week and I'd do my 30-15 sets. It would be like a 45-50-minute session. My cooling was good, so the power was good, and I was happy doing that. So it kind of worked for that.
For where I live, like that 1.5 hour to 2 hour ride is really, it's an annoying ride for me to do, and it's not very good quality, just the nature of where I live. And so if I can sharpen that up, because I go to the gym as well, and so the problem that if I can't really ever do a double day to do the gym, so I end up going to the gym on my rest day because it's kind of not a time efficient 2 hour ride if I go and do it. So my goal is to make that ride on the same day that I go to the gym, allowing me to actually not go to the gym on my rest day, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, you need to move to the Sunshine Coast. I'll convince you when you're up here, Chris, because as I said, I took a few RCA members on a ride from Melbourne yesterday. We did a 3.5 hour loop, not one traffic light on the pedals the whole time. Constant pressure.
I may not need much convincing.
That's amazing. Yeah, the new place I moved, I can get out. I'm not in a big city anymore. I'm in a medium-sized city, but I can just get out and I can ride, and I can reduce that zone 1 or less than zone 1 training thing that we talked about in Strava, and I can get these really high-quality outside workouts where I'm just on the pedals for as long as I want, essentially. It's nice.
Personal question, Jeff. How much did riding factor into your location that you've moved to?
Oh, I mean, I thought about it, but not at all, because I this is where I grew up, and I had family here, and we've been thinking about it for a long time. But it's a give and a take, because like it's higher quality in that I don't have to escape a ginormous city in order to get out and do a ride. But also there's just fewer people here, so there's the group rides. There's no Alviso here. You know what I mean? Like it's different.
Oh, no. Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's big.
The end of an era, boys.
Yeah.
You'll have to hire someone to run a camera for you so you can still do your commentaries with someone else's footage.
No shortage of race footage. In fact, I think I still have one or two, probably even more Alvisos like recorded that I just haven't gotten to yet. But I'm not that far away. Like I'll still go up and I'll still race Alviso with the boys every once in a while, but it's not going to be like a weekly thing. And maybe who knows? Maybe I'll start an Alviso here. You know what I'm saying?
Can I just quickly change the subject? Cam, you reviewed the Allele Blees?
Exactly, yeah. I really wish some of these...
That's not it.
I really wish... No, it's not your fault. I really wish some of these Chinese brands would consult, like, if they're trying to penetrate the Western market, consult like a Western marketing agency or branding agency, because like a lot of, like Elves, Allele, Windspace is okay. Seeker's named after a 1980s porn star. Apparently it's really famous. Like there's just, they could do Big Rock, which everyone thinks about Big Cock. It's like, come on guys, like let's work on this.
The naming protocol.
Super Team even is like, oh man, like
it's a bit cringy.
Anyway, as I think was said before, like I love that review style with the two of you going through it. Obviously I'll link it down below. But essentially, you're reviewing a lightweight climbing bike in 2024. Disc brake, lightweight climbing bike. I kind of just generally have a question just in terms of that category of bike. Because obviously I'm sort of been riding this TCR thing, everyone drink, because supposedly I mention this bike all the time.
Came up again.
But yeah, lightweight climbing bike. So I suppose my question, Cam, is like, where do you see that bike? Who's that bike for maybe in 2024?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I personally wouldn't seek to review lightweight climbing bikes after my Factor 02 experience, because that was my foray into it, and I didn't have a great experience with that bike. I know the Australian distributor for Allele quite well. He does creative wheels, and he's proven to establish quite a successful wheel business. And I know his customer support's really good. His wheels are really good. And he rang me up and he said, I'm going to be bringing in this. And he also builds and was reselling Windspaces and Seekers as well. And he locked in on this Allele brand, and he every time I spoke to him, he's going, "You got to try this Allele. It's amazing. It's so stiff and it's so light. It's so stiff. It's so light." I said, "All right, let's do it." And he was right. Like one of the challenges I had with that review, the channel's been given a lot of bikes over the years, and some bikes we've sent back. And abandoned projects. Others we just sent the frame back, and based on audience feedback, we continued with the project. This bike was just really good. And the challenge when you've been given a bike and it's really good, it's like people tend to like, it's harder for them to believe you, and I understand why. But this bike really did surprise me with as a lightweight climbing bike. Back to your question, I kind of went on a bit of a tangent there in terms of how racy it felt because of how stiff it felt, and it was lacking a little bit in aerodynamics, but pairing a bigger set of carbon wheels with it for like my local bunch ride, it was perfect because we've got a lot of these, anaerobic, surgy kind of like little climbs up here. And as a heavier rider, I'm close to 80 kilos. I really, that's what I struggle with. But having a bike with like 1 kilo or 1.5 kilo less, I really, really felt it. There was a huge advantage to it. So I'm thinking of just purely my own little circumstance. Like, would I choose to, if I could only buy one bike, would I buy that bike? No, but if I could have 2 or 3 bikes, would I have a lightweight climbing bike for those type of situations? Because that would be my preferred, that Allele with those wheels would actually be my preferred setup for my local Tuesday World Champs loop that we've got here, which Chris, you'll do no doubt in the next month or so, and you can see for yourself. But for a crit, would I take it to a crit? No, I'd rather an aero bike, or if I'm cruising down the beach, I'd rather take the BMC team machine. So I think it factors into, like, if you've got 2 or 3 bikes, you definitely want one of, like a lightweight climbing bike. But for me, and I think for most people, unless is it Ed Laverick, the other YouTuber, who's just like all about climbing, I don't think it's going to be your number one bike.
When you put the deeper dish wheels on, so how deep were those?
It was a 58 rear and a 50 front.
Okay, righto. So yeah, a 50-60 type thing. When you put those on, did you find, was any part of you like, oh, this is missed? I'm missing now that snap that I appreciated out of this lightweight climbing bike. Now I feel like I've sort of gone into a muddied, middled ground.
I didn't actually, and it's a good question. I thought I might, but I think I only added, because some of these, 50mm profile rims these days you can get for like, I think even the super teams, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jeff, might be like 1,250 or 1,300 grams for the pair. The ones that I have were anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to remember offhand, but they were lighter than the Dura AC 50s. I don't remember the exact spec, but light and cheap, like incredible.
So you can get 50mm profile rims these days for pretty, without much of a. I feel like they used to always be around 1,500, 1,600.
Yeah, like there are a lot of sub 1,350 gram, 50mm deep Chinese wheels now. Yeah, it's pretty common. Like above 1,350 for a 1,500 gram set, especially if now that carbon spokes are so popular.
That used to be not existent or like prohibitively expensive. Now it's like, yeah, $600. Like it's wild. We're so lucky.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, the weight penalty I think might have been like an extra 200 grams. All it did, of course, in the crosswinds, it's going to blow around a little bit more. But like for me, it was a match that I'd never really thought about, pairing a lightweight climbing bike with some deep profile rims. But a match that I really enjoyed.
Do you see anyone riding? Essentially, we're talking about a bike that doesn't have drop seat stays. Really, I mean that's the kind of, when I sort of look at a lightweight climbing bike now, that's sort of the giveaway feature. Do you see any non-drop seat stays much racing crits, Jeff, or is pretty much everyone in some sort of the aero package?
Yeah, no, you don't see that. That's not really a thing that exists anymore. You don't see that hardly ever. It harkens back to like the Cannondale CAD with the carbon wheels. That was a thing for a long time, but no, you don't see them anymore. And really, I think Specialized pioneered with the SL7, 7, which is like the one bike to rule them all. So you don't see like these exotic, super aerodynamic profiled bikes so much anymore. They all are starting to like collapse into this one shape that's been optimized in a wind tunnel that looks like an SL8. Like they all start to look about the same. It's like not a climbing bike, it's not an aero bike, but it actually is an aero bike because it's been optimized. It just doesn't have the characteristic look.
I just wanted to just kind of delve a little bit deeper into that category of bike, that lightweight one, because I'd kind of given up on it. But then I'm sort of, well, hang on, I can sort of see the joy out of riding this bike. But then when you break it down to a pure performance level, maybe there are some shortcomings. But for someone like Cam, it's sounding like and maybe this is the difference in our weight and our riding style, that you're actually feeling like, what, this is giving me the ability to punch over these little rises.
My opinion on it, Chris, having come from a TCR, from a climbing bike, and having put everything up to an 80mm deep wheel on it, and we talked about this on the show last week, I feel like you can get pretty close to bridging the gap. If you have one climbing bike, you have maybe your standard shallower wheel, which might be a 40mm depth, and then you have a 60. I think for most people, and a climbing frame like the Lily with a 50s or 60 deep wheel, you're not going to notice much of a difference between that setup and an actual aero bike with 40s or 50s. I find the challenge is really the place where it gets you is if you're going to a deeper and deeper wheel to save speed, to get closer to the aero bike, you're losing the crosswind stability. And then as someone who's probably, maybe newer to the sport, you don't want to have 2, 3, 4 bikes. You might also not have the experience and the skill to be able to handle that depth wheel. So you'll get tripped up there in those conditions. But I think in good conditions, climbing bike with deep wheels is like very close.
And for feel-wise, like I sort of think like the other kind of person is, yes, the person who's still on the rim brake bike. I do feel like moving to a light disc brake climbing bike is going to give you the sort of similar sensations going onto that bike as opposed to going onto some deep section Scott foil. And so you'll be more familiar with it, if that makes sense.
I think what people are paying for, like I reviewed that Athos, the specialized Athos when that came out. It was a weird release, right? A premium spec bike, very expensive bike, and it's like, okay, are we going backwards? I think the line that Chris said in that video is like, it's the best bike from 2012, which was funny. And I think it was a joy to ride. It felt great. Racers aren't buying it though. I think it was for this like how people collect classic cars. I think it was like, not that it's a classic bike, but it has classic tube shapes. And hey, if you just want to put on another handlebar, put on another handlebar. You want a different stem? It's got a round seat tube. Like everything is just like it was like bikes were in 2012. That's the reason for the quote. And I think that's a draw for a lot of people, especially the masters, age category riders who are like, I want a high performing bike, but I don't want all this like integration and all that stuff. So I think that's a big draw for people as well. I realize that's a little bit out of the scope of like climbing bike, but I think that's probably where I would put Athos if I was going to categorize it as a climbing bike. It wasn't, I don't even think it was UCI approved, right? It was like under the weight limit. Like no pro teams ever used it or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll probably just round that one up by saying I still think though there's a lot less interest in that. Like if I do a project on an aero bike, more views. All-round bike, okay. Lightweight climbing bike. The first look for this video performed quite poorly. The build video, 16,000 views. Like really, that's probably the worst build video I've ever done by far in terms of people interested. The review, I had to make, I used some kind of controversial or polarizing title, and which probably got more people in. But it was true. Like, I think this bike is better than the Factor 02 van for half the price. It was true. I actually felt that, but that was the title I used to bring more people in. I think if we just did a Liley, review, it probably would have had like, once again, 14,000, 15,000 views. So I think the general interest in lightweight climbing bikes isn't there. I don't think it ever will be there because they don't look as good at a cafe or they don't look as good as at a local bunch ride.
I got a question about the Liley. This is more about sort of distribution and things like that. Because I know there's a brand that has distribution in Australia, but if I order it, it comes directly from China because the shipping's so fast. So for this brand, there is not really any point holding stock in Australia because the shipping time's matched. And then I guess if you then have to deal with warranty, that you're able to send it back to the distributor in Australia. But actually, it's this kind of, it seems to me like a bit of a hybrid thing where it's Australian distributor, but they don't hold stock. I'm mainly just asking question there with the Liley. Do they have a warehouse full of frames in Australia, or how's that work?
I don't know if they've got a warehouse full of frames in Australia. You actually raise a very good point, and I think for people out there interested in buying Chinese frames and investing in a Chinese brands, maybe not so much. I think it's a bit more challenging on the wheel side, but certainly on the frame side. If you can buy through a local distributor, one that perhaps has been around for a while, has got a good reputation, I think it really helps solidify or alleviate that issue that you can have or people worry about if they have an issue with their frame buying direct through a Chinese company. And I know, say Michael, for instance, who does Creative Wheels, Creative Cycle Shop, and who's also a Liley Australia, been around for a while, has proven himself on the wheel side with his customer support and the quality of the product. So I think it's a big tick for anyone looking to invest into a Chinese brand to buy through a distributor, and whether their setup is, you still buy through the company. overseas, but you get supported through your local company, or whether you buy through the local company full stop, like I think you do with the elves. I think it's a big tick.
What about you, Chris? Like, is that a, because at that stage you almost, I guess the fact that if you have a problem, you can send it to someone domestically is probably the big get. But I just, when I saw that this was how it was kind of playing out, I was like, geez, I could see a stage with the shipping times being so fast in a few years where whether you've got obviously a local shop, different story. But if it's just a local, a national domestic distributor, but you're still buying it online, essentially, you're kind of like, where's the value there if it's coming from China anyway?
I don't have a general answer for that, because from my experience, no two distributors are created equal, and that's yeah. I mean, sounds like the fellow that Cam's talking about there, good guy, whatever. Yeah, I just feel that there are a variation when it comes to distributors, particularly in this country, and I'll just leave it at you decide based on the individual one that you deal with.
It's a very good point. Yeah, just because they're local distribution doesn't mean they're going to be awesome. But you can probably do a bit more research. Like I think when they're overseas, it's hard to, maybe it's external to forums and reviews. You could probably do a bit more research when it's your local backyard.
All right, time for some narcissism. This is the warning to anyone who's made it this far. This is going to be YouTubers talking about YouTube. Are we at that point, do you think?
Jeff, are you still good to chat? Or yeah, I know you had a...
I got yeah. Let's
Still good?
I got a little bit of time, not a whole lot.
Okay.
Maybe we can wrap it up with this.
Okay, cool. Have you got any questions for us?
Yeah,
maybe?
I do. Yeah, so look, I've been a bit of a creep in the corner for a while, Chris. I like being a creep in the corner. Watching your channel, and I was watching your channel before I was even into YouTube. I was watching your local YouTubers, you and Maven, Mark Ferguson, who I still speak to actually. It's a shame he's not making content. And I know you've been at it for, is it maybe 7 or 8 years?
Yeah, that'd be about right.
And I was just curious to understand, like you got to the end of the chapter or the phase with the team stuff. Like, how are you feeling about the channel when you got to the end of that phase? Because obviously you kept going, but like, I'm just curious to understand how you were feeling about what you were going to do next, or even if you kept going at that point in time.
Yeah, interesting. Well, so the channel during the period of having the team was never a priority. I always viewed it as it was our point of difference for the team. So it was, you know, we could maybe go to a potential bike partner or an apparel partner or whoever that might be and say, look, you know, we're just another domestic bike racing team. But hey, we've got this other thing going on where, you know, we're on YouTube and we do videos of the races we go to, and we try and create some sort of community around that. So it very much served that purpose throughout that period of time. And you know, I would kind of jealously, I suppose, every now and again. I must admit, I didn't watch a lot of cycling YouTube at the time. And I would see like your channels and you guys were blowing up. And I'll be brutally honest, like at points I'm like going, why are these channels blowing up? I mean, looking back now, it's very, very obvious. But I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening. Yeah. And so when then the kind of deterioration of the team really happened over sort of a 6 to 8 month time. And a lot of it was the sponsors pulling out and the financial issues around that, which I won't go into. But just coming back to the YouTube side of it. So yeah, basically what happened is I was in the US, Jeff, the time before I visited yourself, and was with Tyler, the vegan cyclist, who'd been really the only kind of guy that I'd sort of stayed, because I'd met him back in 2017 or something, and we'd sort of stayed in contact. And I was out on a ride with him, and you know this, Jeff, like he's a very, obviously he's a very chatty guy, but he gets straight to the point with things. And he just asks me, he's like, what's the freaking story with your YouTube stuff? Like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? And he really just hit me. And I can remember going on this ride with me, hitting me with all these questions about what's the direction of it? What are you doing with this? How do you do this stuff? And ultimately, he made a statement to me that was on the lines of, I like your stuff, but you need to actually work at it. And I believe in you. He actually said, like, I believe in you. And I went away from that thinking, oh, cool. Like this guy's, anyway, I do regard him as a really good mate. But coming back from that, it was all good and well to have had that sort of said to you. But then back here with Jesse, and I think both of us were sort of in a flux period, and we were literally. So what was my direction for the channel then? Very much, I was going to give myself 3 or 4 months and just throw lots of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Literally, was the loose plan. And Jesse came up with. I can remember we were on a ride at Centennial Park, and he was like, we were just chatting, shooting the shit as we would normally do on a bike ride, and he was like, "This doesn't happen. Like this chat, we should be recording this." And my initial thing was like, "You're right. We should be recording this." And
said every
this, Jesse?
20-year-old bloke ever that's like, we should start a podcast.
Well, no.
meme
So
now,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. It wasn't a podcast then, because I got in my head, he's right, we should be recording this. So I went out and I started working out how to record an on-ride. So I was going to set up like 2 cameras, and they were going to point at us on our handlebars, and we were going to have like things, and we were going to ride laps to Centennial Park and record it. That was the theory. And I got like 5 minutes into one test of this, and I was like, this is not happening. And yeah, then we were like, okay, well, let's just record it, back in your office. And I was like, all right, whatever. And we did. And that was, so the actual like nuts and bolts of it was like, let's just talk about the stuff that we go on a bike ride.
It's funny because I think about some weird shit at times. I thought when I watch your podcast, it's kind of like you guys just have good chemistry. It's like banter. And I thought, I reckon these guys have been doing this going back years, driving to like Inverell together in the front seat, just talking absolute hot shit about cycling, but people want to hear it, obviously, because you've created this podcast and it's good banter, it's good chemistry. So it wasn't the drive to Inverell, it was actually laps around Centennial Park where this banter was happening. But yeah,
actually, it was that for a while. There's a couple on my channel of like 2-hour. We were driving to Victoria for some event. We literally have the car chat videos, as that was another thing at the start.
Maybe that's where it sort of planted the seed, but. Yeah, I mean, being on YouTube and sort of like breaking away from corporate myself in 2017 and failing and not doing well for quite a significant period of time, and then you find your feet, and it takes a while to get there, and it requires tenacity and hard work, and I think a lot of people don't see that, but because I've been through it myself, I kind of look at it. And I was curious to see how you kind of felt, when you got to that point in your channel, because the channel served the purpose for your team, as you said, but also perhaps in the scheme of YouTube, wasn't doing what perhaps you wanted it to do, but you kept going and you found a way and you've created something, both you and Jesse, that's really clearly, you obviously don't get it right all the time, but you obviously get it right more often than not. You've created something that's really, really successful. So yeah, I just want to say, from my perspective, from where I sit like a creep in the corner, congratulations on what you've done.
I appreciate that, mate. Thank you very much. Jeff, I'm conscious of time with yourself. You popped a sort of question or statement in. Do you want to maybe have a chat about that?
Yeah, in our document that we had. Yeah, for sure. I'll first say also, I'll just echo what Cam said. I mean, I absolutely love the content you guys are making. You guys seem like the, you're so consistent, right? Like, I feel like your format is really working, and I go to you guys for, news and updates and everything. And yeah, just more encouragement. Continue doing what you're doing. It's good for the sport.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's a bit of a big topic. I don't know if we have time. We might have to save it for the next time we get together.
We can save it. Yeah, we don't.
We can save it.
Maybe.
I'm happy to save it.
Okay, maybe we'll tease it though. We'll tease it to keep people. Yeah. I wanted just to talk about, because it's been something that's come up with some other YouTubers a little bit in our space. but just like, how do you build a social media company which requires sponsors to come in? Let's be honest. For people who aren't in the space, YouTube ad revenue sucks. You can't even, you're working for pennies on the, for like less than minimum wage if you're depending on YouTube ad revenue, at least in our category. If you're finance, whatever, maybe it's different. So in order to make these videos and this practice sustainable, you have to bring in sponsors. Well, once you let them in the door, you have to be very careful what that relationship is like. So I wanted to have this discussion about how people approach that, because I have figured out a way that works really well for what I'm doing. It allows me to say whatever I want, and I can also have an editor, have a videographer, have a graphic designer, have these people to help support what I'm doing. But again, it's a big topic, so maybe we tease it there. And
if you've got time, I'd be interested to hear what your framework is then.
Yeah, well, I think just high level then. Maybe we can dive into this topic a bit more in the next one. But I kind of have there's like 3 versions. A brand reaches out, hey, we want some exposure on your channel. And there's kind of 3 different, there are 3 different approaches depending on the brand, depending on the type of content. So the first one is just like kind of no duh. We're going to stop the race footage and we're going to talk about Squarespace or something or whatever it is, right? And it is a clear ad break. And I'm going to talk for 45 to 60 seconds. So you can skip, get back to the race. They get their exposure, whatever. It's fine. Very clear. They have no creative control in any of that video except for their 45 to 60 seconds. They can say, oh, don't say that word because for legal reasons or whatever. So that's pretty clear. People know what that looks like. The 2 other is where for what the content I make, it gets a little bit more interesting and dynamic, because a company will reach out and they'll say, hey, we saw these wheels and can we get some exposure on your channel? The first thing I do is say, well, can I create a story around these wheels? Because if it has some defining feature, say it's a super lightweight wheel set, incredibly lightweight wheel set. Well, I want to do something cool with that, right? I want to tell a cool story about this product. Ooh, there's this KOM that I really want to get. And if I can save 500 grams on this obscenely light wheel set, like that's the story. So it's a win-win, because I get my KOM, I get to tell a cool story. I get to hire the people to help me tell that story. And then also the brand wins, because they are now getting to show their product doing the thing that it's designed to do. So those are some of my favorites. Like it's integrated into the content. And YouTube, you click a button, you guys know this, but people maybe don't, that says in YouTube, like this is a paid piece, this is a paid advertisement. There's a little tag in the corner of the video. I will say in the video, thanks to sponsor so-and-so for providing so-and-so for this video. And then I will also put, in case there's any confusion in the description, sponsored by so-and-so. So anyway, it's clear it's an advertisement, but also I'm like doing the thing with the thing, So anyway, that's my favorite because it's fun to tell that story. And then the last one, which I've kind of dipped my toe into over the last, I want to say, year or so, is this testing. This is where it gets a little bit strange. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is people have asked me about this. Companies will reach out and say, we want you to do one of your A versus B testing videos on one of our products. And I'll say, okay, just so I'm crystal clear, you have no creative control in this video. You're not seeing any drafts. You're not telling me how to make it. I'm going to submit it. It's going to go live. I'm going to hit publish. Everyone's going to see it, including you. And this could be really bad news for you. I'm going to honor the results of the test, because that's the only way that we're doing this. At the end of the day, we're servicing our fans, right? We're not servicing our advertisers. The advertisers help make this possible, but we're servicing our fans. So, those are harder to make. I think it's pretty interesting and unique when companies agree to that, because to me, that's like they are really behind their product. Sure, we'll send it to you, you run the test, and this could be really bad news for them if it doesn't test well, or if I think it's a piece of crap. I'm going to say whatever I want in this video. So that's kind of the third version. And as you can imagine, that third version is more rare. Companies are reluctant. They don't pay. Sometimes it's just product. So that's a little bit harder to navigate, but those are kind of my 3 avenues to work with industry and to make this thing sustainable.
Is when a bicycle company sends you gear for free and doesn't pay you, is that sponsored?
That's a good question. I have sent stuff back. Sometimes that's the agreement. I get it, I use it, I send it back. Sometimes I get it, I look at it, and I say, this isn't a good fit, and I'll send it back. I think, Cam, you brought that up earlier. I've had that before. That's more for the first one, where a company will send something and say, hey, we want, a 60-second ad. And I'll look at it and I'll say, I don't, this ain't it, chief. Like, I don't like this. This isn't good for me. This isn't good for my fans. I don't want to promote this because I just don't like it. I've had that happen a number of times. In the instances where I get it and they send it and I get to keep it, that's considered compensation. And absolutely, I think that's considered sponsored. And I would call it out as sponsored in the video because I'm getting something for free.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk for hours on this one. It's a rabbit hole and it's an art form, I think, bringing it in. And I think what you've got to realise is no matter what you do, people aren't going to like it and they're going to tell you about it.
Right.
But I think the vast majority, which sometimes, we get fixated on the negative, provided you do it in the right way. And I've done it in the wrong way before, and I've learned from that. Provided you do it in the right way, the vast majority of people get what Jeff is saying. You can't spend 50 hours on a video and be accepting of $200 or $100 ad revenue. Like, they just work out the hourly rate. It doesn't work. So you need to be able to work with brands, but it's tricky. And I mentioned before, coming off the back of the O'Leary review, we were very positive towards that bike. But unfortunately, it was a very good bike. And we have a pro mechanic that assesses it from a mechanical perspective. Our riding experiences were all positive, and we got a bit of backlash for being too positive. But as I said previously, we've had bikes which, like the Sava, was a bike that I got given. It was inspected by Aaron. He was like, "This is not good." I took the fork to Gary at Carbon Steed, and he goes, his words were, "This is a piece of shit." And I sent the bike back, and the comment section was actually, "You're being too negative towards this brand."
Right. Yeah. You're never going to win, right? Yeah.
You just never got to win. So you got to ask yourself the question: is am I trying to do this the right way? Do I feel like I'm holding my integrity here? And provided you feel that way, and I think the vast majority of people feel that way, you've just got to ignore that small portion of people that are going to hate on you, no matter what. And it's going to happen because it's called the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said it. I mean, like, you just have to be honest. That's the North Star. And the second you start trading in your honesty for like $1 or just like I'm gonna make this brand happy, like, there goes your credibility, right? That can never happen. That will never happen. So anyway, you're right. We could talk about this for hours. Unfortunately, gents, I do have to bail. But it's been an absolute pleasure. You guys are welcome to continue podcasting without me. No, I would love to sit down for a longer one though. In the next
hang on, let me just speak to my editor. No, I want to end as well.
Yeah.
No, that's good, lads. But we will. I think let's try and do it before Christmas.
Well, we don't have to talk about that specifically, but if you guys want to hear about anything, then comment below and we can talk. We are bike nerds. We will talk for.
Oh yeah.
How about my experiences on the rim brake bike? Going back to rim brakes.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go.
That'll
be for the next one.
That's 3 hours.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you so much, Cam. Like I said, we'll do that again. And thank you, Jesse. Sorry, left you out.
That's all right. Thanks for coming,
guys. Obviously, their channels down below, and links to the videos that we chatted about. And let us know if you'd like to some of the questions for future eps. Thanks again, guys.
Later.